So I'm Pantelis. I'm an assistant professor here at the Institute for Marketing and Management at the Danish Institute of Advanced Studies. So I got my PhD in cognitive psychology, and I also have background in economics and the social science more generally. I study how humans make decisions, how we make decisions, and how people interact with each other, and they make decisions jointly, how they behave collectively, so to say. The first time that I came across the concepts when I was still at university, the first time that I came across probability theory and statistics, it appealed to me, and I thought, yeah, actually this seems to be very relevant, and this seems to be related to how I make some of my own decisions. So I was intrigued, and I picked more into it. Now, so that's part of the answer. Then the second reason is that I was really frustrated by studying economics. Economics is a science that makes very unrealistic assumptions about human behavior. So in most economic models, mainstream economic models, the assumption for a long time was that people are super rational, are able to make decisions rationally, are able to contemplate the different alternatives, and they are able always to do these massive amounts of calculations and then make the best decision for them. And very often those hypotheses are unrealistic and unworkable. And this frustration grew in me more and more. I thought that I was just working on a science that didn't have firm foundations. And one of my professors talked to me about cognitive science and psychology, and I thought, yeah, I should have a look. And I had the opportunity to apply for a master's, escape economics, and then try something new, try a discipline that had looser assumptions about human rationality, that was more open to interdisciplinarity and bringing ideas from different directions, such as philosophy and psychology and artificial intelligence, and then try to use all those ideas in order to understand human decision making and how we cope with all the complexity that we encounter in everyday life and how we are able to manage it and make decisions. So that was my way out of economics and like approaching more actual decision making research. So eventually I got a PhD in psychology, although I started in economics. And so now in the meanwhile, we should say that economics itself studies human behavior, and there is an entire branch of economics called behavioral economics that is more experimental and just reflects about all those very strong assumptions. And like very recent Nobel Prize was given to a researcher that has contributed a lot in this field of research, right? But so decision making is studied across disciplines, and behavioral decision making is studied across disciplines. Just happened, I think it was more of a coincidence that I took more of a psychologist angle to this aspect. And of course, there have been important psychologists who grew into economists in the way of their careers. They came back to the field and they had huge impact. And probably the two most common are Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, and they started as psychologists. They were trained as psychologists, and they developed theories that were very, very impactful within economics. And then they created this behavioral revolution, this kind of stream of research that was more actively contemplating about real decision making rather than strict theoretical models that economists have in mind.
How do we make decisions?
So, of course, experience is hugely important in the decisions that we make. Of course, things that we try in the past and we had positive experience with are very likely to influence the decisions that we'll make in the future. And this is something that I study. Of course, that's one perspective in decision making. You can also, if you have a lot of information on your plate, you can try to plan ahead. You can try to think how you can best integrate that information and then plan ahead into the future. Okay, so those are kind of two opposite poles that you very often encounter in the behavioral literature. So what happens when humans or animals learn from experience, as opposed to what happens when they have to make decisions on the basis of information that they have at hand, and they have to plan ahead the decisions that they will make. Okay, and then I think it's not the one or the other. The two things interact for us to make decisions. So the past experience that we had have a huge influence on future decisions that we'll make, and they help us form expectations, and then maybe they also help us extrapolate and plan further away in the future. Okay, so we kind of learn to generalize on the basis of experiences that we had in the past, the restaurants that we tried, bars that we've been to. Okay, so we kind of learn what are the positive attributes of those alternatives that we've tried in the past, and then we try to extrapolate using that information in the future.
Which methods are used to study decision making?
You can study decision making in a theoretical way, like economists for a very long time have built models assuming that people behave in a certain way, but you can also build simulations, simulating the behavior and performance of different strategies, or you can simulate the performance of the behavior and performance of interacting individuals, or you can go empirical and then do experiments, or go out in the field and then see what people do in real life, or you can try to get data from the real world and then try to get into the patterns in the data and then try to understand from whatever data is at your disposition what kind of behavior this means. Right? So there's a manifold of approaches, and then depending on what you want to show, then some approaches might be more adequate to give you answers.
How did you analyze decision making in your recent research paper?
But I've designed an experiment with a colleague of mine at University College London, in which we try to create an abstract environment that resembles the decisions that people make when they decide to go to a bar or to a restaurant. And then the general framework that we use to study this problem is called contextual multi-arm bandits, or multi-arm bandit setting. And this is a framework that is used very broadly in artificial intelligence, has been studied extensively in order to decide which advertisement, for instance, a website will give to you when you visit it. Okay? So we kind of took the mathematical formalist and the general framework, and then we tried to see how humans behave in this kind of situations. And then people in the environment that we set up can choose repeatedly among a large set of alternatives, and then they can learn from experience what are the good alternatives, which ones are on expectation better, which give you better experience. And they can learn also the patterns, so they don't have to try all the alternatives. You don't try all the restaurants in a city, but you kind of learn which ones are the most promising, and then you kind of direct your attention immediately to them, right? So even when a new restaurant comes in town, then you know whether it's worthwhile visiting that restaurant or not.
How does artificial intelligence, IA, forecast human decision making?
There are a lot of techniques and tools that are used across the internet, across websites, to make predictions about what people like. One type of tool is the recommender system. Essentially what the recommender system does is trying to learn your preference on your behalf. And it has access to a very large database of other people who have done similar choices to you, and then it uses this database in order to match you with other similar people, and then try to find out what other people that are similar to you liked. And then this is a way to generate a prediction, right? So another tool is what I mentioned, or a framework, is multi-arm bandits. And this is a very general approach to make autonomous decisions. And the general idea is that you can use all contextual information about an individual in order to try to guess what they will like in a particular situation. So, I mean, probably we, humans and artificial agents, we use kind of similar techniques in order to, or not techniques, we might use very, very similar approaches in predicting our own preference as AI is using to learn our own preference in our behalf. It's like AI has like much larger computational capacities and access to many more data than we do, so they have an advantage in this respect. But humans, on the other side, we are better to extracting patterns from situations. There are many things that humans can do very well that are very simple, and then artificial intelligence has a very hard time doing. And like the most simple things for humans are actually the hardest things for artificial intelligence to do, like walking, or vision has been hard for a very long time. Now we're coming to a stage where AI can cope with that. But generally, abilities that are kinetic or that appear to me as effortless and very simple are very hard to reproduce at the moment.
Will artificial intelligence be able to take over human decision making?
Actually, they have been already, both doctors, artificial doctors and artificial judges. So there is a very recent study, for example, on the American judicial system that shows that you can use artificial intelligence in order to improve both how just the decisions are and how efficient they are. There have been IBM's, Watson's computers, and after IBM developed this very strong artificial intelligence that is able to ask general knowledge questions, they continued to develop this product and they dispatched it to hospitals. It can assist doctors in making decisions about patients. Again, having access to huge databases. But also, this is something that has been studied for a very long time. We just think the general public does know about it. Already in the 50s, there has been a very famous psychologist called Paul Mell, has done revolutionary studies in trying to compare how human judges, for instance, doctors, perform in comparison to simple statistical models. You could think of them as a primitive version of artificial intelligence. And the conclusion was that in some cases, actually, those very simple models cannot perform actual doctors, actual human decision makers. So I wouldn't say that it's going to go all AI, but there will be synergy between the two. And then I think it is the way that we should envision the future is trying to find out what are the strengths of human intelligence and what are the strengths of artificial intelligence, and then try to find ways in which we can leverage on both, and then, like as humans, create really good decision processes that are both just and efficient. Yeah.
How does the study in decision making help you in making decisions?
In my case, I think it helps you reflect, understand the situations in which you are. If you've studied decision making, understand what is at stake, what are the parameters that are important, you can understand what can go wrong, and then you can use that in order to rectify bad decisions, or to troubleshoot, understand the causal process that can lead you to a bad decision, and then go exactly to the causal path and then change the thing that didn't work, and then try to make better decisions in the future when you come across similar situations.
What will be your next research work?
I studied different aspects of decision making. I'm particularly interested in social decision making. So, for instance, how we can learn from similar others, what we ourselves will like. So, say, for instance, that you have been to the movies recently, and you have seen some movies that I haven't watched. How can I take your advice into consideration when I am going to decide? So say that I want to decide between Batman and Spider-Man, and I haven't seen any of those. And I know from our past interactions that we have similar tastes when it comes to the movies. So, or the similar ones. And I have other friends that are similar or dissimilar to a different extent. So how can I integrate all this information into making my own decisions? So that's a topic that is currently very present in my thinking, and trying to see how different strategies that people can use, like listening to your best friend as opposed to just looking online and looking for the average score. How do these strategies perform in relation to each other? For the moment, I do this research using large-scale simulation. I get data that is available already online, and it is used by the recommender systems community, and then I kind of reanalyze it, use the data to provide a new perspective into how humans make decisions. So going beyond what the recommender systems community has done so far, by individualizing and then see seeing how those strategies perform for different individuals. So that's our current angle. But in the future, we hope to do experiments or like also take different approaches into this topic.